Are you sick of scrolling through Netflix and Hulu searching for movies that are high quality and family friendly? Christian Cinema has thousands of movies available on demand that you can watch anytime, anywhere. When you sign up for a giving membership, a premium offering from Christian Cinema, you can watch 5 free movies every month. Learn more about becoming a giving member at givingcompany.com/giving membership and start watching great movies today. The other side of the road is safe, where we sidestep being bothered and avoid getting involved. But rolling up your sleeves and boldly going where few dare to tread, that's walking through Samaria. Each week on our podcast, we introduce you to the special few who walk in the spirit of the Good Samaritan. On behalf of the Giving Company and your hosts, David Hendrickson and Dan Riveros, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Walking Through Samaria podcast. This is your co-host, David Hendrickson, with my other co-host,
Dan Riveros.
Dan, good to hear you.
Good to hear you, man. We're back doing it a little further apart today.
We are online, not in the studio, which means there could be dogs barking, cats shrieking, rings or knocks at the door. Like, there's all kinds of variables that can enter a good old-fashioned Zoom call. I want to introduce today's guest, and before I do that, I just want to say a sincere thank you, because we had scheduled her for this particular podcast in August. And today is Thursday, June 30th. We're going to release this as soon as we can. But 1 week ago today, almost last Friday, the Supreme Court decision on Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Group came down. And it seems like our world has kind of exploded since then. And so we asked Talli if she wouldn't mind coming on sooner, because I think she has an incredible story to tell and an incredible perspective. Talli Moellering, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
We have a lot in common. Talli's from the Midwest, which I am as well, Dan, and college athletics are going to show up at some point through this podcast like they always do. Talli, if you don't mind, I'm going to read your bio for our listeners, and then we are going to dive into what is a super intense topic right now, in hopes that we can create some clarity, some understanding, some compassion amongst people of faith, and hopefully some calls to action from Talli, etc. So here we go. Talli Moellering has been the executive director of A Beacon of Hope for 13 years. A Beacon of Hope empowers women and families through pregnancy diagnosis, decision support, and sexual health services by providing compassionate medical, emotional, and long-term care that specializes in hope, healing, and recovery. Talli graduated from Indiana Wesleyan with a business degree, and quickly, through a volunteer role at a local women's clinic in 1990, realized her passions, educating teens to make wise sexual health choices and helping young girls struggling with an unplanned pregnancy. Talli is a certified sexual risk avoidance educator, a post-abortion recovery specialist, and has additional certification as a crisis pregnancy coach through the American Association of Christian Counselors. In 2015, Talli wrote a book called Let's Talk About Sex, creating a great tool for parents, compiling over 20 years of teaching sexual health education in private and public schools. In 2017, Talli led the charge to have both clinics that function under A Beacon of Hope accredited by AAAHC, a national industry leader that has an exclusive focus on ambulatory healthcare. Talli leads a team of 18 incredible employees and 25 volunteers, ensuring every patient that walks into one of the clinics feels safe and is informed prior to making a choice. Talli and her husband David have been married for 32 years and consider Atlanta home since moving from the Midwest 20 years ago. Talli and David have 3 married daughters, 3 grandchildren, and 2 granddogs, all of whom thankfully also live in Georgia. Talli Moellering, again, welcome to the Walking Through Samaria podcast, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Welcome.
Well, I am sure from listening to your bio that our audience is like, okay, what's going to come next? What is it that we're going to talk about today? So we have a lot to go through, but I I'd like for you to start with talking about a beacon of hope, if you don't mind. We are going to spend a lot of this podcast talking about the Supreme Court ruling on Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health that happened on Friday, the 24th of June, and then ultimately led to the overturning of the Roe versus Wade ruling back in 1973. But I think in order for people to understand your perspective and embrace your expertise, it would be great if you would talk about the mission of A Beacon of Hope and the scope of services that you provide.
Well, thank you. I'd love to share, and I'm going to share kind of from a broad perspective because I have learned that people don't always understand all that we do. So it'll take me a few minutes to just kind of get through all of the different services, but hopefully that will be helpful. So our mission is to empower women of all ages, like you said earlier, through pregnancy diagnosis, decision support, and sexual health services. We have full-time employed nurse practitioners that provide all of our medical services, plus a volunteer OBGYN that serves as our medical director and a volunteer radiologist that reviews all of our scans. In reference to pregnancy diagnosis, most of the women we serve are hoping the pregnancy test is negative, and a few are excited that it is positive. We care for both of them. Our nurse practitioners also complete a sexual health screening with each patient. And for patients with a positive pregnancy test, again, they're not very excited. They provide evidence-based factual education in reference to all of the legal options available, which includes parenting, adoption, and abortion. Abortion will still be legal in the state of Georgia, at least for a while, in reference to our current law. No matter what, it is still going to be legal. It's just going to become illegal a little bit earlier in the pregnancy. I think people are a little bit confused about that. I think that they think that it's just going to be illegal overall, but that's not the case.
Right.
We also provide full panel STI testing and treatment, plus additional women's sexual health services like UTI, BV, yeast infection testing and treatment. Each one of our appointments is a little bit unique because it is with our licensed nurse practitioner, plus a trained patient care advocate is part of the appointment as well. And she steps in a very non-manipulative way and helps the patient process through what her situation is, what are the circumstances that's leading her to believe that she doesn't want this pregnancy. And then in reference to positive pregnancy tests, if our patients choose to abort, which several do, then we have an opportunity to step back in and provide a post-abortion exam, which isn't common. A lot of individuals who have an abortion don't receive a post-abortion exam and then could have complications. But then we also step in and offer post-abortion healing. And those two services are open to everyone in the general public, not just somebody who became a patient of ours at the very beginning. If they choose to carry to term, then we provide extended care through our social services initiative, and we walk alongside of the patient if they choose to parent until their child turns 2 years old. So it ends up being a 3-year-long relationship where we're, really providing education, fellowship with other women in similar circumstances, baby items provided by the community, and then case management to really empower our patients to parent well and provide a safe environment for their families and their babies. So I think it's common for people to think, they're a crisis pregnancy center and they just provide pregnancy testing. And that is who we were back in the day, but that's definitely not who we are today. Like I said, we just have a broader scope of services that we offer at this point.
So, you talked about real doctors, real nurses, right? You yourself are certified in a number of areas. Do you know how common it is for centers to exist around the country like yours? Are you all relatively unique or not so unique?
I think that if you were to take into consideration centers in the state of Georgia, which right now I think there's probably around 75 or 80 in the state of Georgia, and then, probably 2,000 or so across the country, I think that a lot of centers are moving in the direction of how we operate. I do think that we have led the way in the state of Georgia. We were the first in the Atlanta area to go through AAA HC accreditation. I know that there's centers across the country that are doing that now. So I don't think that we're the country leader, but I definitely think that we've led the way in reference to a lot of different initiatives. And some centers are definitely not moving in this direction, but there are others that are definitely starting to move forward.
Yeah, it's great. How do you know, just to ask the unique question again, I mean, I want to say this, and I think this is an important kind of moment of faith, which is one of your patients, or some of your patients, in a given time period, will choose to have an abortion upon learning that the results of their test are positive. And you don't shun them, right? I mean, you keep them within your care for quite some time.
Oh, absolutely. So when I became the executive director 13 years ago, it was extremely common for the patients that we saw at our clinics to be what we would term likely to carry. So most of the patients that walked in the door, first of all, we didn't see near the numbers that we do now, but most of those patients that walked in the door, they were excited for a positive pregnancy test. They were likely to carry. They might have had a few circumstances in their life that would make it challenging, but they were wanting to carry to term and parent. Well, when I came in, I kind of took a look at how we operated and what our mission was and what we were sharing with the community in reference to saving the lives of the preborn. And I really changed it up. If you talk to anybody that's been here for a long time, he'll probably hear a little bit about that. But I really changed it up in reference to our focus being 100% on the patient that's planning to abort within 4 to 6 days. And that's kind of the measuring tool that I use in reference to the services that we offer, the marketing that we provide. If a likely to carry patient walks in, that's wonderful. That's beautiful. We celebrate with her. We're going to partner with her and assist her and offer her services as well, just the same. But the target patient that we're trying to focus on, which is at least 60% of the patients that we see, they're planning to abort. They're not really considering any other options.
Yeah. Wow. Well, incredible summary, Talli, and thank you. We're going to dive into more of this in a minute, but our listeners are probably wondering, how does somebody get on this journey? Like I mentioned, always nice to have a good Midwesterner on a podcast. That's what I am. You and I probably grew up not that far from one another, Ohio to Louisville, Kentucky, which is on the Ohio River. Do you mind sharing with our listeners just a little bit about your personal journey and ultimately what led you to the role at A Beacon of Hope?
Sure. I laugh because people ask me that question all the time, especially because I teach a lot of sexual health education in the public schools. And that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't think that I ever answered that question with a sexual health educator in the public schools, but
right.
But here I am today. So I'll try to give you the short version and not include too many details. But yes, I was born in Columbus, Ohio. And then when I was going into 9th grade, we moved to Carmel, Indiana. So I went to Carmel High School for my high school experience. When I was in 9th grade, I had a really close family member that experienced an unplanned pregnancy. So I was exposed to the challenges and the stereotypes connected to unplanned pregnancy and the challenges of unplanned parenting at a really, really young age. I was only in 9th grade. There was a lot of confusion in reference to, what that was supposed to look like and, were they going to get married and are they going to parent and how does that work? And, I was just exposed to it very upfront and personal. I then went into college and met my husband and we got married. And so I moved to his hometown, which is Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I found out that his parents...
Fort Fun.
See?
That's right.
You're from the Midwest. You
exactly.
Actually know that. Yeah. So then I found out that his parents had actively been involved in the startup of their local crisis pregnancy center, which I think is very providential in reference to how God works. And so based on my personal family experience, I started volunteering on Thursday evenings. I didn't know anybody in Fort Wayne. I was new to the area. It was a way for me to try to meet people, get connected. And I was what we would now call a patient care advocate. I don't really remember what I was called back in the day, but that's the term I would use now. And I did that for years and then also started teaching sexual health in the public schools. Then we fast forward, my husband moved us to Atlanta, and I'll just say, as soon as we moved to Georgia, I fell in love with Georgia. I considered it home right away. I often joke, I joke that I was accidentally born in the Midwest, but I'm truly a Southern girl. But we've been here for 20 years now. So we settled in, and I did an internet search just to see if there were any centers similar to the one that I had volunteered at in Indiana. And I found a beacon of hope. And I called the previous executive director and said, can we get together? I'd love to learn more about what you are doing. We did so. I really didn't even become actively involved at that point in time. I was raising 3 daughters, and my husband traveled a lot. And I actually had a great job that was with the school system. So it was, the August to May schedule that worked for my family, where I was in the schools, in the public schools, teaching sexual health. And so I didn't make a connection at that point in time. But then a few years later, in 2009, I reached back out to that executive director, and I said, I just consistently keep feeling drawn to get back into the movement and to make a connection. And she said, well, Talli, that's interesting, because I just gave my letter of resignation to our board of trustees. Wow. And we got together for lunch, had a conversation, and I'll never forget, I said, what are your thoughts in reference to me applying for this position? And she said, if you want to work a ton of hours, be stressed out all the time, constantly be faced with crisis, and make nearly no money, this is the job for you.
This is the job for you. Yeah, sign up. Yeah, sign right here.
Yeah. So I applied for the job, and another kind of inside joke is that I didn't even tell my husband that I applied for the job, not because I was keeping it from him, but because I really didn't think it was going to materialize to anything. I remember thinking that it would be good practice for me to update my interview skills. And after a few interviews, the board of trustees at that point in time offered me the position as the executive director. And I did a little bit of negotiating. One of the things that I negotiated was that at that point in time, they didn't really have a prevention initiative teaching sexual health education in the public schools. And that was something that was near and dear to my heart. So I said that I'd be willing to take the job and focus on the crisis care, as long as I was also allowed to launch a prevention initiative. They agreed to that, but told me I had to come up with my own funds to do so. And so here I am 13 years later, and work with an incredible team of women. And I'm very passionate about what I do. I love the fact that I get to use my business background by running the organization, but still get to experience touching the hearts and caring for women in the midst of crisis situations.
Wow. That is awesome. That's a great journey. We were going to talk about this, I think, a little bit later in the show, but do you mind talking about what is it like to be a sexual health educator in the public schools, and how might that have changed now? Again, this is sort of another area of outrage, right? It feels like, and maybe this is just what's on social media or just what's on the news, but it feels like educators and parents are kind of squaring off on this topic of sexual health. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience and what you think it might be like today?
Well, it's challenging. I mean, like I said, I have now been teaching sexual health in public and private schools, but mainly public schools, for about 26 years. I've taught in 7 different counties across 2 states, about 70,000 students in the 26 years that I've been doing that. Wow. And I focus on 7th, 8th, and 9th grade students, but I've also taught 6th grade and 11th grade, but that's not the main focus. And it is my heart and passion to be in the public school environment. I'll teach in the private school environment, but I really have felt called to be in the public school environment. And I have thoroughly enjoyed it. It has been challenging. I love to educate teens in reference to the truth, provide medical accuracy, make sure that they're fully informed in reference to the choices that they're making, in reference to boundaries that need to be set, all of those different types of things. But I can honestly say, and I kind of feel vulnerable saying it, but the last 2 years, because I'm still teaching in the schools, the last 2 years have been unbelievably challenging. Yeah. And completely different than anything I've experienced the 24 years prior to that, in reference to the burnout of the teachers, the turnover of the teachers. I've had relationships with a lot of these teachers for 15 years and they're gone now. The way in which the students interact or do not interact, it's definitely been challenging. The message still needs to be heard. We still need to be in the schools. We still feel called to do so, and we'll do so as long as we continue to have that platform. But it is a new day, and it is harder than it's ever been before. And we have a lot of young people who are really, really lost. They're confused. They're trying to figure things out. But as I say that, I also really have noticed that we have a lot of young people that really absolutely don't care. Or they've been led to believe that there's no reason to care. So the challenge is real. I don't think it's going to get any easier. I think that, it's definitely still a mission in front of us, but it is a hard day to be in the classroom, I think, with any subject, but definitely in reference to sexual health.
I would venture to say that this is a generalization, and I could be all wet, but I think that Christians probably believe that, the having sex, let's just call it what it is, can be emotionally damaging, particularly if it's not within a committed relationship, regardless of age, right? Or whatever. And that also the act of, I shouldn't say the act, but the abortion procedure can also have kind of damaging emotional effects on women. I would venture to say that most Christians probably believe that way. You wrote a book, Let's Talk About Sex. What is kind of your perspective on, having sex, not in a committed relationship, having an abortion? Is there trauma? Is there depression? What are the real effects that happen there?
Yeah, so there's definitely, some evidence-based research or, proof that those things are connected. That's definitely been something that's been challenging, I think, culturally across our country, to be able to, get certain organizations, associations, groups, to really factually state that there's a connection in reference to, the natural bonding that takes place when two individuals have sex with one another, they're intimate with one another. Back in the day, we talked about oxytocin being released in the brain and how that intimacy and bonding naturally took place. Nowadays, we really can't discuss that in the classroom environment because we don't have enough research to back it up. And we're very cautious in reference to what we say and what we share. We make sure that we truly can back it up by research. And so, that's gotten a lot harder. You've got some individuals who would say that choosing to have an abortion and that needing post-abortion care or post-abortion healing, that it's just absolutely no big deal and that there's no concern or reason for us to focus on that. And then you've got a whole nother group that some of which have experienced it and they've, really, really struggled with different forms of addictions, with different forms of relationship issues. It's a hard one because, I don't like saying it this way, but it's kind of like it's one of those topics that you're always going to have two sides. And, you can have, we care for and sit with women who are post-abortive that look at us and say, I'm absolutely fine. I am so glad I made that decision. And I don't have any regret and I'm not experiencing any shame. And then the next appointment, we have a woman and she's extremely emotional and she's struggling in reference to her mental health, and everything in her life is connected to the choice that she made to abort. And so, I personally and I professionally believe that there's definitely a long-term impact in reference to those choices and that people do need to go through healing. But in our country, the sad thing is that it is very, very controversial. And so, figuring out how to approach it, our approach is if we have medical accuracy or it's evidence-based, then we can discuss it. But that's professionally speaking, but it's challenging. I mean, it's a hard one.
Yeah. If you had one thing to say to parents, one bit of advice, caution, whatever it might be, of 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, what would you tell them?
Well, that could be an entire podcast, but you told me one. Well, first of all, I just would say start a lot sooner than 7th, 8th, and 9th. The conversation needs to start a lot sooner. Talk to your kids earlier than you ever thought that you should. Weave the topic of sexual health and healthy relationship choices into everyday conversations. Repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Use the stuff that you're seeing, that you're hearing, that's taking place culturally, daily with your kids to be able to present how the choices that are being made are impacting young people in healthy ways or unhealthy ways. You know, parents are competing with social media, TV, and movies. That's a pretty hard competition. Make sure that you're in the game and ready to go. Don't keep your mouth shut. Have dating guidelines and relationship guidelines in place, again, much earlier than you think that you need to. Have a plan and a system in place in reference to accountability. I mean, it's a hard one. And I raised 3 daughters, and so I was going through it at the exact same time that I was writing my book. I often had people, say to me, I bet you don't let your daughters date. And we did let our daughters date, but we just conversations open. So
it's good.
The biggest thing is you can't ignore the topic. The concept of back in the day, if you don't talk about it, it won't happen. That's no longer. So
yeah, that's good. Well, let's go ahead and wade into the explosion that happened in our society, in our country on Friday, June 24th. I think a lot of people probably, I don't want to seem insulting, but my guess is a lot of people that have weighed in heavily on this don't know that the Supreme Court wasn't presented with Roe versus Wade. They were presented with Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And that case, I believe, was, did the state have the right, according to the Roe versus Wade decision, to restrict abortion to 15 weeks or earlier? And so I just want to talk about the law itself for a second. And I think it's really important for anyone, but particularly for Christians. I'm going to sound a little preachy here, Dan, so, give me a break. But to do your research, right? To do your homework, to understand science and data and truth and history and law before kind of making some broad stroke comment, particularly on social media or to a loved one, or God forbid, somebody in passing, right? Like, it's just really important, I believe, for people of faith to be credible. So, what I understand from the 1973 decision was that the court did provide for abortion under the privacy clause, due process clause under the 14th Amendment. And that also, the Supreme Court at the time, I think the ruling was 7-2 in favor of allowing abortion in the country under the privacy clause of the 14th Amendment. But the Supreme Court specifically said that it is a challenge to rule on the right to abortion and not rule on the viability of the fetus. And so today, if you were to look around the country, there are 7 states today and the District of Columbia. Those states are Alaska, Colorado, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, and Vermont that provide for abortion up to full term. And then there are some states, I believe, that had stricter requirements, almost like the state of Mississippi, that maybe blocked abortion sooner than viability, which I don't know what you talk about evidence-based, Talli, which I love. I think the viability of a fetus right now is somewhere around 22 weeks, 24 weeks, something around there. Again, you can correct all of this once I'm done preaching, but it seemed to me that Roe was failing, period, on both sides. And of course, nobody wants to really talk about the fact that, that Roe was going to have to be dealt with, whether it was the states providing for abortion up to full term, or I think in the case of the state of Virginia, somebody even offered legislation for a week after birth. And there's been other proposed legislation around the country. So, I mean, when the decision came down last Friday, how did you all interpret it, and kind of what was your response?
Well, first of all, I want to say well done, because it has been amazing to me how uninformed individuals are.
Yeah.
And there's not been very many places for us to get all of the details, to actually know the facts. That's what I always come back to, is what are the facts? What's actually the way this is going to work? And so you did a great job describing it. I hope that people better understand exactly what has actually taken place. I think that, I don't remember your very, very last question, but I think that, one of the biggest things that we have to take into consideration now is times have changed. I mean, we know so much more than we knew back in the day. And this is such a silly example, but I use this one sometimes just to kind of give perspective. I have 3 daughters. My daughters are 24, 26, 29. And, when I was pregnant with my 3 daughters, you got one ultrasound at 20 weeks, and it was optional and not required, and there wasn't any genetic testing or anything. Well, now all 3 of my daughters now have one baby, and so I've experienced pregnancy in today's day and age, and they're having 3, 4, 5 ultrasounds during their pregnancies. They're having genetic testing by the time they're 12, 13 weeks along. I mean, we live in a different world. Science, we know more now than we knew back in the day. So we really can't debate anymore in reference to, whether or not it's a life. And I think that that's been the case for a while. I mean, I'll sidestep here for a minute and just say that a lot of individuals in our community, when I have opportunities to go out and speak, I often share this. There's a lot of people who think that we're still trying to prove life in reference to the number of abortions that are taking place in the state of Georgia, which right now it's about 33,000. But the patients that we're seeing, and they're the patients that they're planning to abort within a week, they know that it's bleeding. They're not questioning life. So that's been off the table for a really long time, and I don't know that people understand that. So back to the law, we knew that this was probably going to happen. In reference to, like you said, the Mississippi case. A lot of people never even made that connection.
Right.
The Life Act, or what people term the heartbeat bill in the state of Georgia, it's been under review since the beginning of 2019. So we knew that was out there, and that there were some changes that were getting ready to take place. I'm connected to several directors in similar roles in the state of Texas, one in which I'm in a national cohort group with. So we stay very connected. We've been watching what took place in Texas and trying to kind of figure out what that might look like for us. And so, our law in the state of Georgia has not changed yet. We are not a trigger state, but we have been told that we should be prepared, that the Life Act is probably going to go into effect within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And that's going to change things drastically in our state. But again, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of confusion in reference to what that actually means.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask this question a little bit later, just because we have so much to talk about. But, I do kind of find myself conflicted with, can this country really come to agreement on the parameters and guidelines? And if you just reference, like you mentioned, Texas, Mississippi, Georgia versus the 7 states plus the District of Columbia that allow abortion up to full term, it just seems hard that the country would actually agree on what the guidelines and parameters would be. And so to that extent, you can kind of say, I see why this is falling to the states. for specificity, because it just seems that the country is more interested in tearing itself apart. But I digress a little bit. One of the things that bothers me, Talli, just because Dan and I have had so many people on this podcast that are with organizations that are doing really good Samaritan work around foster care, poverty and hunger with children, reducing the infant mortality rate around the world. We've had Katie Kenny Phillips on here, who's one of our authors. She adopted, gosh, Dan, I hate that I might get this wrong. I think two girls.
Yeah, I think you're right.
From Faith Bridge foster care here in Atlanta after they fostered. We've had Beth Guckenberger from Back to Back Ministries, which runs orphanages all across the country of Mexico to help kids thrive. Mike and Karen Bowles, who are dear friends of ours, adopted 3 girls, 3 sisters, so that they could all be adopted together from the country of Mexico. We've had Chris Boleski from Bethany Christian Services, which helps kids, in the foster care system, get in the foster care system, helps immigrants and refugees, the challenges of unaccompanied minors across the border. I mean, I could go on and on about the number of people that I know specifically that are thinking and trying to care for children after birth. And yet I think people of faith get cast as the pro-life crowd. And maybe because of some opinions about expansion of Medicaid, I think we get cast as, and I'm not intending to generalize, but I think we get cast as people who don't care about what happens once the child is born. Mm-hmm. What is your perspective? You've obviously been kind of in the thick of this for decades. I know we can do more. And, Dan and I implore people of faith to kind of step in and think about fostering, think about adopting, think about volunteering. I mean, there's so much that we could and should do, but what is the reality about faith-based organizations and how we're helping kids after they're born?
Yeah, I agree that there's often been a misunderstanding in the past. And to be honest, I think in some instances, the misunderstanding has been somewhat legitimate in reference to some individuals and associations and groups, part of the pro-life movement in the past, but if we look at movements in general over the last 34, I think that we would all agree that, over time we learn as we go and we change, and that change is imminent. And, I think that that's a lot of what has taken place within our movement. We work really, really hard. And even when I'm out speaking and when I'm interacting with churches, and, there's been times where I've really even talked to my entire team about not even really using the term pro-life, not because we aren't pro-life, but because just the term within itself is politically polarized. And so that can be really complicated. But, I often hear that faith-based communities, they only care about the baby. They're only focused on the preborn. And like I said, we have failed at that some in the past, but I don't think that that's necessarily the case in today's day and age. I think that we've made a lot of progress. I think that we're, starting to better understand that the only chance we have of saving the life of the preborn is to focus on the mom. I mean, that's the only chance that we have. Yeah. And I think the other thing that is so interesting is all of those organizations that you mentioned. I'm familiar with several of them, unbelievable organizations, but what we do, we're ground zero. Like you guys are
in the heart of it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you can't even focus on those organizations until we at least know whether or not we've got, a positive pregnancy test and then a carry to term decision. So we're really ground zero in reference to what it looks like. But our number one focus and the way that our team operates, we have very specific models that we use in reference to all of our services and the care that we provide. And it is first and foremost, we have to meet the mom right where she is. We have to listen to her. We have to consider her circumstances. We have to let her know that her thoughts, her emotions, and her fears, they matter and they're real. We have to offer the medical services and the extended care and the social services. We have to take all of that into consideration. So I think that the old mindset of, as soon as she decides to carry to term, we won. And I'll be honest, when I started my role here at this organization, that was the mindset.
Yeah.
And, we had to really, really change it and realize that first and foremost, who do we want walking in our door? First and foremost, we want the patient that truly is considering abortion, because that is our target patient. And then as soon as she walks into our door, our focus needs to be on her, who she is, what her circumstances are, what's leading her to believe that she can't carry to term, and then how are we going to partner with her? And our partnership has to be well beyond delivery. I mean, we revamped all of our social services. We've been for a long time partnering with our patients until their child turns 2, but we've been in the midst of revamping our social services program to take it even a little bit further and to broaden it just a little bit more so that we can partner with our patients even more. We have to do it that way. There's no way that we can just focus on the baby. The only chance that we have, like I said, of saving the life of the preborn is if the mom feels heard and cared for.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's what the focus needs to be. And I think that I've learned that I need to be cautious, because I do know that there are individuals who have been called to focus on the political side of this movement. And at the same time, there are individuals, I think, like myself and our team, that have been called to really focus on the compassionate and the care side of this movement. And, I sometimes I wish that we would do a better job working together, because sometimes the way that the political side handles the pro-life movement makes it a lot harder for the compassionate and caring side to actually have an opportunity to care for those in need. So, it's challenging, but we've got to figure it out. We've got to do better as a community. Churches need to do a better job. I mean, overall, there's always going to be a political side, but this is a heart issue. I mean, that's the thing that I've had so many people text me and call me and email me within the last week. And I feel like I'm kind of the broken record. Maybe I need to probably come up with something better to say, but I just keep saying, our patients don't care what the law is. Our patients are focused on their circumstances. They're dealing with shame. They're dealing with fear. They're dealing with circumstances. It's a heart issue. It's not a law issue in reference to the patients that are sitting in our care rooms. And so, as much as I'm thrilled that we are accomplishing things in our country in reference to what I would call personhood, and I believe we're getting ready to make that transition in our state of Georgia, there's pieces of that are going to make it more challenging than ever before to save preborn.
Yeah.
That's probably the thing that I've been shocked how many people think that we won. And I'm like,
I agree with you. Yeah.
I don't think that people realize that women are going to rush towards what I would call chemical abortion faster than ever before. I don't consider that a win.
Yeah.
So, it's a hard one.
Yeah. Well said. Your website says that a third of the women in the community that you serve have had an abortion. And you also mentioned that some of your patients have abortions. They choose abortion. I mentioned this before, but I love the post-abortion services that A Beacon of Hope provides. Can you tell us one more time why that's so important? And, this is where I would encourage our listeners as believers, as Christ followers, as Good Samaritans. The compassionate side of our faith is what needs to win here. And, I can't think of, I mean, I'm sure there's things more compassionate, but I mean, it's pretty compassionate as Christ followers to lean into and care for women who have chosen abortion.
Right. I think that I've kind of learned that I haven't checked that stat rate lately in reference to, if I remember correctly, I think that it says 1 out of 3 women over the age of 45 are now post-abortive. And like I said, I haven't checked it recently, but I've learned that a kind of a good way to put that into perspective a little bit and give us, somewhat of a visual, if you were to go to a UGA football game, I'm not a UGA girl, but I'll kind of talk about the UGA side of this. If you were to go to a UGA football game and think of all of the men and women sitting in the stadium, if we know that 1 out of 3 women, if that's still accurate, over the age of 45 are post-abortive, and that also means that we've got post-abortive fathers sitting in the stadium, think about the number of individuals that would be sitting in that stadium that have abortion in their past. Mm-hmm. And I just have realized that people don't understand that so many individuals that they have a story. So many individuals that made a choice, but are now experiencing a loss and shame that is really, really challenging to process through. And so we do our best to offer, like I said, post-abortion exams to anybody who has had an abortion in the area. They did not have to come to us originally for pregnancy testing. So that's open to anybody. But then also post-abortion healing. And we revamped our entire post-abortion care program probably a year and a half ago now, because we just realized that it's getting harder and harder to get people to be willing to make any long-term commitment. I think nowadays people don't really, sign up to get together for 8 weeks and those types of things. And so, we do so virtually, we do one-on-one, we do small groups up to, 3 or 4 individuals, never more than that. Our post-abortion care leader, she's post-abortive. She's got an incredible story. She will go through curriculum with them or have it be, more conversationally based. We also, part of our transition was we needed to understand that a lot of the post-abortion material that's out there, it's very, very in-depth and faith-based, which works for individuals that are far along in their faith. But if somebody's not far along in their faith, to dig into the Word of God is really, really overwhelming, and they're already overwhelmed with what they're trying to process through.
Right.
And so we're trying to do a better job of meeting them where they are. We're trying to let the churches in the area know that this is something that we offer to everybody in the community. We've also tried to do some education so that people realize that I've been a little bit surprised, but I understand it a little bit better now, that people often will know someone who's struggling with depression or struggling with addiction or struggling with, anxiety or suicidal thoughts or, and that's a very concerning struggle. But what people don't realize is a lot of times the root of that is a previous choice to abort. And so, we need to do a better job, I think, in all of our communities of understanding that there's often a link in reference to whether or not somebody's a post-abortive individual. And again, that goes for mothers and fathers. It's not just a mom thing, and so how are we going to care for them? How are we going to, walk them through a process where they can understand that there is forgiveness? That's who Jesus is, even though so many people consider abortion to be a greater sin. I don't really think that that's how it works, but some people do believe that. God is still a God of forgiveness, and that is open and available for them. And we want them to know that that's something that we would be willing to walk alongside of them in the midst of that process.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, one more question I'd like to ask you before we kind of, ask for first some more advice from you and some perspective on the future. One of the things that I found really impressive about a Beacon of Hope and your 2 locations is your accreditation for ambulatory healthcare. Why was that so important to your mission?
Yeah, so I love the fact that you even know what that is, because it was
spent a lot of time in healthcare prior to doing this. So
right.
Yeah.
So it was a really big ordeal and decision and focus for us to make the decision to move forward with becoming HHC accredited. And I made the decision to lead the team in both of our clinics in that process back in 2015. It's a pretty intense process. It includes 550 rigorous standards that have to be met in order for us to even have a surveyor be willing to walk on site at our clinics. It includes focusing on things like standards, the standards that include like patients' rights and responsibilities. What does your governance look like? How do you handle things administratively? What's your quality of care look like? Do you have quality improvement things in place, clinical records, HIPAA stuff, infection control, facilities environment? I mean, it's intense. It is broad. And, we made the decision to go through, well, my team wouldn't say we. I made the decision that our team was going to go through the accreditation process for really multiple reasons. I mean, yes, one, because, and this is uncomfortable for some people, but I just need to speak honestly. I mean, the pro-abortion community is aggressively trying to shut us down. That's just a factual statement, whether you believe it or not. I mean, it's factual. So, I really moved our organization away from being connected to the movement, the pro-life movement, and only being connected to associations within our movement. We're not really connected to those anymore. And really to just, we're a medical clinic. We've got nurse practitioners. We've got an OBGYN. We've got a radiologist.
Yep.
We're a medical clinic. So how about we just operate as a doctor's office? How about we just operate as a medical clinic? So doing so ensures that we're operating above reproach. It provides external accountability. It encourages our team to remain up to date in reference to what are the current standards of care. It helps us identify what we need to work on. I mean, we're required to do what's called QIPs on a regular basis. And so, something goes really, really wrong. We have to turn it into a QIP and investigate as to why it went wrong and how can we do better next time. I pray that it comforts our patients so that they know that we take their medical care very seriously. I also pray that our Beacon family, our donors and our supporters, understand that we're not just winging it, that we actually, we're being audited regularly. We're paying attention to how we're supposed to take care of our patients. What does HIPAA actually look like? I mean, a lot of people don't know how extensive HIPAA is. And I'll tell you, nowadays, when I walk into a doctor's office, I'm like, well, you're not following HIPAA because I know what that means now.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Yeah.
I would say that it was one of the hardest things that we went through as a team, but probably one of the wisest things that we've gone through. We're getting ready to go through our third survey that will take place in March of 2023. And what that means is that a surveyor that we've never met before, and we don't even find out who that person is until about 48 hours before, they show up at our clinic and they have full access to every single thing in both of our clinics. They're usually with us for about 2 to 3 days. They sit in on patient appointments. They look at all of our patient charts. They look at our policies and procedures. They talk to our board members. I mean, they look at every single thing that we do. And the report that we get is 300 pages long in reference to what we're doing well, what we need to work on. And then if there's something that we actually did not pass, then we really would not receive our accreditation. And so thankfully, we've gone through 2 surveys. We have received accreditation both times. And like I said, we're getting ready to go through our third. So, I think that it sets us apart. We were the first center like ours in the Atlanta area to get accredited in the state. I believe that there's 4 or 5 other ones now, but it's challenging, but it really gave us a baseline in reference to every single thing that we do. And you know what? I mean, something comes up and literally a team member will come to me and say, hey, this happened. What do we do? And I say, pick up policy. What does policy say? Or if it's one of those things where I say, get the accreditation book out and follow whatever the accreditation book says, like it gave us a map that has, really helped us, I think, be, like I said, operating above reproach in reference to everything that we're doing.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, as we wrap up, Talli, I think I know the answer to this question based on what you said earlier, but we had the deputy opinion editor at Newsweek, Batia Unger-Sargon, on this podcast. She's actually been on this podcast twice. And she was talking, she just brought this up as an example about the political disparity in the country. She said that if you were to look at the Venn diagram on the issue of abortion, it's actually much more overlapped than we think. And I'm going to paraphrase here, and I'm not going to get the percentages right, but she said of people who consider themselves pro-life, They believe that abortion should be allowed in the cases of rape, incest, or mental health of the mother. People in the majority of people who consider themselves pro-choice believe that abortion should be limited to the first trimester. And as I look around the country, I just don't see a way that a law gets written like that and gets passed. And so to some extent, maybe this is a cop-out to everybody who's listening. I don't know how we would be able to codify Roe without going to the states. I mean, in today's day and age, again, maybe people of reason, like the gun control law that recently passed, could put something together and the country could adopt it. I would be very surprised. But with that as a bit of a preamble, I think your message to us is your patients aren't focused on the law, and while civil advocacy is important for believers, we need to lead with compassion here, right?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, I think that, I talked about this a little bit already, but, politics are connected. The politics connected to what I would call, I think that there's actually three categories. I think that there's a pro-abortion category, a pro-choice category, and a pro-life category. Or I don't know that the word category is the right word, but all I know is that all of it's polarizing. It's never going to change. It's never going to change. I mean, even the church that you go to, there's people who have different beliefs. The family that you're sitting with at the Thanksgiving meal, there's people who have different beliefs. I mean, we've heard, people talk about the rape side of this on a regular basis. Well, one person says, well, she was raped, she should have the right to abort. Well, the next person says, but the child didn't do anything wrong. I mean, we're never going to come to an agreement. So, I know that there are people who have to stand on the political side, and we need them to focus on what they're focusing on, and we're thankful for that. I do hope that those political leaders would be involved a little bit, or at least have conversations with those of us who are, on the front line and in the grassroots of what's really taking place, because I do think that's the only way for them to have perspective. But I agree with you that it needed to be passed down to the state. I do agree that we do have to have laws in place, but I'm going to stick with what I've already said. I probably sound way too repetitive. Even with all of that, abortion is a heart issue. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, you talk to anybody on my team, and I have the most amazing team, in the state of Georgia, I'd say in the United States, but I mean, I have the most amazing team. And when that case is over and our team member is processing through exactly what went down, nobody was talking about politics. Nobody was talking about the law. Yeah. I mean, it was about the patient and her fear and her anxiety and her circumstances. Is the father of the baby anywhere to be seen? Is he even in the picture? Those are the things that really are going to make an impact. I think that, a saying that probably so many people have heard, but, is it about making a point, or is it about making a difference? Yeah. And, if our goal is to really make a difference, then we have to be willing to sit down and listen. We have to be willing to walk alongside of. We have to be willing to understand different thoughts and feelings. I don't think that we have to be willing to give in reference to our personal beliefs and what we believe to be true or biblical or right. I believe that we do need to stand firm in reference to that. It's the way we approach it that we need to be focused on. We're never gonna save the life of a preborn. We're never even gonna get a woman to walk into our clinic if my number one focus is abortion is wrong and abortion should be illegal. I mean, it's not going to get me anywhere. Yeah. But if I say, I'm willing to listen to whatever is going on in your life, and we're going to do the best that we can to care for you and help you and walk alongside of you. I think we have a chance. And, I say this all the time. I think we have a chance even if she chooses to abort, because you know what? She was loved on. We might be saving the life of the next child that she might choose to carry to term. She was introduced to Jesus in a loving and kind, compassionate way. I mean, it's a hard one, but that's really what I think it comes down to is, do we need laws? We do. Is this law in the state of Georgia going to solve the abortion problem or the abortion situation in our state? No.
Right.
Not. Right. And that's the part that I don't think people are getting. Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest things, and I know I'm going on, but I just want to share this last thing. People have said to me over and over and over, like, man, aren't you so excited? Don't you think this is awesome? It's going to be great when the law does change in the state of Georgia. And I've responded by saying, we're concerned because what we considered to be one of our biggest saving opportunities was what we call the pause.
Yeah.
And patients would walk into our clinic and they would feel that they needed to abort, and they would feel that they needed to abort quickly. And we would say, take a deep breath. We neutrally educate them in reference to all of their options. We say, come back for an ultrasound. You don't have to make a quick decision. You have a chance to pause and really think this thing through. Well, you know what? The new law has removed the pause. Yeah. And so am I thankful that we're identifying personhood in our state? I am. Yeah. And I pray that people hear that. But I don't know that it's going to solve the lives that, I don't know that it's going to save the lives that we think it's going to save. And so we've got to have a clear understanding in reference to the fact that I think young girls and women are going to rush towards chemical abortion faster than they ever have before. Yeah. Because we've removed the pause. And our state leaders did not get ultrasound required. And so you put those two things together, it's going to be really challenging. So did we win? I don't know.
Don't know. That is incredibly insightful, Talli. Thank you. Thank you for that. Before we let you go, I am sure our listeners might be interested in getting their hands on the book. Is Let's Talk About Sex still available?
Oh my goodness, it's still available. It was written in 2015. It probably needs to be updated. I haven't had a lot of free time to do that, but it's still available on Amazon.com.
Very good.
It really just kind of gives parents some thoughts and ideas and challenges in reference to how are they going to have conversations with their kids and what does that need to look like. I appreciate you sharing that, but yes, it is still out there.
That's great. And if people want to learn more about A Beacon of Hope or find and follow you on social media, how could they do that?
Yeah, so we would love it if people would be interested in jumping on social media. A Beacon of Hope, we've got Instagram page. We've also got a Facebook page. We've got a website, which is www.abeaconofhope.com. If you go on to our website, you can click on a link that says that you would like to receive information, but our website is very in-depth that provides a lot of information. We've got a really, really exciting event getting ready to take place in March. It's our 25th anniversary as an organization, and we have Lawrence B. Jones coming in as our speaker, and he's going to share his story. We're excited about that. So all of that information is available on our website. So if anybody's interested in learning more about Beacon, that's definitely the way to go.
That's awesome. I think I found you on Insta, but it was mostly like grandkid pictures.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah. I actually have a website and everything, but I just have not had the time to keep up with it. I have a granddaughter that is 14 days old today, and I have a grandson that is 1 month old on Sunday. And then I have a granddaughter that is 14 months in 2 days. And so I'm kind of busy because, I still have a job and everything. So yeah, I haven't gotten to do much with my own personal sites lately, but everything that I do, my focus is Beacon of Hope. So that's the best way to learn more about who we are and what we do.
we had Danielle Strickland on this podcast. Dan, you may remember that. Mm-hmm. And we asked her, how do you juggle all this stuff? And you're clearly juggling a lot. And her answer was that she was a woman.
Yeah.
How's that? Yeah.
I've always thought, when I get to heaven someday, I do want to ask the Lord why he only gave women 2 hands. I think we probably needed more.
Yeah, there you go.
But in all honesty, I am very, very blessed. I have a husband that strongly supports the mission and who we are and what we do. So that balances things out quite a bit. And now my daughters are adults and they're on board with who we are and what we do too. So it has been a juggling act, but I've got a great family that's been behind me in the midst of it all. So
that's awesome. Well, the most controversial thing you said on this podcast, Talli, is that you're not a Georgia fan.
We're a War Eagle family. Go.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I thought maybe you were going to do Ohio State from the Columbus.
Well, I'm from Ohio, but I've been here 20 years and we've got kids that went through Auburn. And so that's kind of become our school. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, although, they're not looking the greatest these days, but we're still an Auburn family. So.
Our last recording was with Link Forrester, and he is a huge Auburn fan. I have to say, Dan, this has got to be right. We are leaning towards the majority of Walking Through Samaria podcast guests being Auburn fans.
I think we are.
That's because it's a great school. It's a great place.
Unbelievable. Well, Talli, last thing before we let you go. Again, I can't wait to share this with our audience. I can't wait to share this, frankly, with friends of mine and colleagues of mine, because this has just been incredibly insightful. And it just goes to show you that if you pay attention to the headlines, if you pay attention to the politics, you're going to miss the meat of an issue. I just really believe that that's where our country has gotten to. And our listeners are tired of me hearing it. And I know I sound preachy, but you've really been enlightening and insightful in this conversation. This is a podcast, Talli, about Good Samaritans, about people serving, people of faith, serving people that are not like themselves, which is what I think we were called to do in the parable in Luke chapter 10. Can you give maybe one final directive to our listeners about how we be Good Samaritans when it comes to this incredibly divisive, incredibly emotional issue of abortion?
Yeah, I would kind of go back to, just consider pausing yourself as an individual and, really taking into consideration what others are processing through. I have been so saddened over the last week with the posts that I've seen on social media on both sides.
Yeah.
I even hate the fact that I have to say that they're sides, but
I agree with you.
I've been saddened, and I've chosen not to engage. I've had a lot of people say to me, why aren't you posting? And I've chosen not to engage because it's not going to accomplish anything. I mean, that's the biggest reason not to engage. But I think that we do need to stand firm in who we are and what we believe and the truth that we know. But the way in which we stand firm needs to be having a heart that's willing to listen, having a heart that's willing to understand, having a heart that's willing to meet somebody where they are, even if you completely disagree. And I'll be honest, I've been a little bit frustrated lately because I kind of feel like, I know I'm not supposed to say sides, but I kind of feel like people on our side constantly are getting labeled as the ones that are, mean, aggressive, and too hard. But I feel like if that's on both sides are doing a poor job in reference to this whole thing. And, what are we accomplishing? Are we taking care of women and preborn babies in the midst of it? I don't think we are.
Right.
I think that we're missing a huge opportunity there. So that's what I would say is just be willing to kind of pause and listen and consider other people's circumstances and still speak the truth, but speak the truth in love. I learned that way too late in life. I look back at my first 20 some years way too late in life. So speak the truth in life, or to speak the truth in love, or keep your mouth shut. It might be time to just not say anything. I don't know. Don't engage if you aren't going to be able to speak the truth in love. Mm-hmm. So
that's good. Talli Moellering, everybody, Executive Director of A Beacon of Hope, author of Let's Talk About Sex. Talli, this has been incredible. And again, I can't thank you enough for juggling your schedule to get on with us 6 days after the overturn of Roe versus Wade and the ruling on Dobbs versus the Jackson Women's Health Organization. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Talli. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.
For more content like this, visit us at givingcompany.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Walking Through Samaria.